All right, guys, this is it. This is the last part of creating my Kaiju 8 cosplay. This is a competition piece. I generally probably wouldn't have done as much work on all of the parts as we've gone along if it hadn't been a competition piece. In fact, I have other cosplays lined up for 2025 that are going to be pretty easy, simple, 1 or 2 week progress videos that aren't going to be as involved as this one. But again, this is a cosplay competition piece. And because it's a competition piece, I wanted to add like 1 or 2 extra like wow moment things to the costume. Things like the enormous gun, the LED lights, the 3D printed armor pieces, and this piece that we're going to talk about today, which is the formal jacket. In Kaiju 8, they have power suits, which they will fight in, and then they have their formal military uniform outfits, which I also thought were pretty cool looking too. So what I have decided and kind of engineered is to have a tearaway formal military jacket to go over the power suit. This is going to be kind of a big deal for me. It'll be the first like suit jacket I've ever made. It will also be something that's going to need to be tailored to fit over all of the bulky armor pieces that I am implementing in the power suit that goes underneath. So I can't just use the pattern blocks that I've created for my normal everyday like pattern making. I have to create something entirely new that's going to accommodate for my back armor pieces, for the pouches that I'm wearing on my body, and for like the bracers and other kinds of gear that is going to go underneath this jacket. Now, the jacket is meant to be torn off on stage. I'm probably not going to wear it a whole lot around. It's more for the show, right? The theatrics of being in a cosplay competition. But it still needs to function. So I need to engineer how to make it open quickly, but also stay closed until I'm ready for it to be open. And I also need to make it fit well. If you're going to do a tearaway costume piece, it needs to be something that doesn't look like it's a tearaway costume piece. It needs to fit well. And so that's going to be a feat of engineering, is being able to tailor this to make it look like it is fitting me decently well without being too obvious that I have a whole nother suit underneath. But in the end, I'm pretty proud of how it turned out. There are a couple of things that I have learned since about suit tailoring and through my experience that obviously I would improve next time. But I am pretty pleased with how well it turned out in the end. Let's talk about this suit. I really wanted, as part of this Mina Ashiro costume, to make a tearaway version of her formal, like, military uniform to go over the top of the power suit. Now that I have my power suit done, my gun done, boots done, bracers done, boots done. Did I say boots? Anyway, the point is, now that I have a good portion of this done, it's time to move on to this formal uniform. I am going to have to alter this a bit. Since I am putting this over the top of an already existing piece of like armor and suit and stuff, I am going to have to modify my own measurements from the pattern blocks that I already have to something that's going to accommodate for all of my hidden suit pieces. As well as the fact that because I have a suit on underneath, I cannot do the tall socks with the short skirt situation. I will have to make a pair of slacks to go over the top of everything in order to conceal it. Things that I have done in research for this is I have decided that the closure on the front of this is going to be magnets, and that I'll just have to cleverly hide the way this belt kind of connects so that it's not actually attached in the front. My biggest thing, aside from having to alter it to fit not my body size, since it has to accommodate for the other thing, is that I've never made a suit jacket before. So I am super unfamiliar with how they come together. So I did go and buy a couple of suit jacket patterns to kind of get an idea of what goes into the making of just a suit jacket. I do know that a suit jacket sleeve is a 2-part sleeve. And that's one of the things I'm most worried about the whole situation. Since I have spalders, I have shoulder armor that's going to be underneath this, I really need to make sure that this whole shoulder to sleeve transition works really well. Interestingly, at least I will not need to put shoulder pads into this costume because I again have armor already on underneath it, but I do need to look into how we shape, as you can see in here, this 2-part sleeve. So you have an outer part and then an inner part that's closer to the body on the suit jacket. Men's suit jackets are built this way, women's suit jackets are built this way, and I have just never used a two-part pattern for a sleeve before, so it's something that I need to kind of have an example for before I even get started. So I will be opening up both of these patterns and kind of maybe not necessarily using the pattern, but understanding how the mechanics of the suit goes together before I decide to do a mock-up of this suit jacket that I need to make. None of these really match the shape of the jacket that I'm trying to go for, with this kind of like middle panel here. These ones have pockets. I wouldn't need the pockets. This one's probably the one that I'm leaning towards being the most like what I'm trying to do, where I would just not put in a center opening and just replace these front panels with this more hourglass shaped front panel. I'm not entirely sure yet how all this is going to go down. I got to break into these patterns and kind of look around a bit before I really have a plan. So these are the two pattern pieces for the sleeve that I'm looking at using. I haven't measured how wide they are in circumference and whether or not they are as is capable of accepting the width and bulk of my armor underneath the suit jacket sleeve, but it gives you a nice kind of understanding of what's happening here. What we have here is, this is the part of the sleeve that goes in the armpit. You see, here is where your arm would go, like the bottom of your inner armpit, and then the sleeve, this would all go in the underneath part of your arm. This is the part that goes over your shoulder. Oh, we lost it. There we go, over your shoulder, and then comes down over the top of your arm, kind of like a sandwich where you've got sleeve, arm, sleeve. So you're making kind of like a sandwich out of the sleeve instead of just like a single piece cylinder the way most sleeves are created. The other thing I'm thinking I might use is also the back pattern pieces for this. Obviously the front is going to have to change, but these are the two pieces for the back panels of the coat. They also have like a small like lining piece that goes around the yoke of the jacket in the back, but I'm not going to use that. I do intend to fully line this, so I'll just cut this 2 times, one out of the main fabric and one out of the lining fabric, and call it a day. But yeah, so these are the pieces that I'm planning on working with. Whether or not they stay as is, or I have to mess with them in order to get the effect I'm looking for, is still up for debate. But I have a place to start from now, because before I had no experience at all with anything to do with the fine tailoring of a suit. This will give me a reference point to refer back to as I continue to move forward on this project.
After I finished making the paper mock-up, I then proceeded to make a fabric mock-up of the pieces of this jacket that weren't going to be following the original design sections of the paper pattern that I was using. So here is my Frankenstein kind of pattern. This is the front panel that's going to match my source images. These are the sleeves. I'm not going to change the sleeves because what I've done here with this pattern is I've decided to alter this side front panel so that it goes all the way up the shoulder line to connect in with this. So underneath here, I just have a little extra piece of pattern paper kind of stacked onto the end of this pattern so that I can make it seamless with this new panel that I've made for the front center of this jacket. So I'm going to use the front side panel, and then I'm going to use the back 2 panels, right, from the original pattern, which means the armhole here will still fit the sleeve pattern that went with it. And this is going to be my mock-up. I will probably have to adjust it, but we're going to go ahead and mock this up and see how it fits on top of my suit, and then start making adjustments from there. So here are the panels of pattern that I did eventually mock up. Now, interestingly, because this is an asymmetrical pattern, for all of the shell part, the torso part of the pattern pieces, I only need to cut one of each, because I only need one of each. Each pattern piece will only be one part of the garment. It's not going to mirror on the other side, so I'm only going to need one of that piece. Except for the arms, I will have to just make sure that whenever I'm cutting, that I am making sure that the right side of the fabric is going the right direction so that I don't make it inside out when I cut it.
As I get further and further into this project, working on the uniform jacket that goes with my cosplay, I've been forced to look at how a suit jacket is constructed. The first thing that I noticed that I had never patterned before was the fact that most suit jackets have a 2-part sleeve. We have a top, and then we have an part that goes under your arm, like in your armpit and against your side. I've never patterned a 2-part sleeve, and I had to find a jacket pattern that incorporated this that I could use as an example, because I had no experience with it before. Once I did that, the next thing I had trouble with was the lining. The thing about the lining on a jacket is it's a little bit different than the way I would line a dress. If I line a dress, I'm just going to copy all of the outside fabric onto the inside exactly as it is. But for a jacket, you have this added lapel here on the inside, which it is a separate piece. It's not just a folded over piece. So you're patterning 2 pattern pieces for the 1 pattern piece on the outside shell of the jacket. On top of that, what I noticed is horizontally across the jacket, all of the pattern pieces of the lining are the same. They line up with all of the seams. But once you get to the point where you're talking vertically about the jacket, the hem goes underneath the lining. So I had to remove some length on here to get everything to line up horizontally, but keep all of the length here so that when we hem it up, we get this like overhang part here. I did eventually figure this out. The next thing that I notice is that you don't see a lot of the outside detailing, like this pocket is not on the inside. So anything that I do on the outside of this, I need to do before I add the lining. So what I need to do is I'm gonna have, there's gonna be outside details. I know that the buttons on this jacket in particular do look as though that they were put on after the lapel was closed. But I was considering putting my buttons on before the lapel is closed. That's something that I will look into later. But I need to be very careful about making sure I have all of my details on the outside of this jacket before I close the lining and the jacket together.
So I decided to start on the front panel here, this like center panel section of the jacket. This is the lining, and then this is kind of like that folded over front part of the jacket where you would find the buttonholes and things. So that was kind of like my solution to that. So I've got the lining assembled. And then I've made some bias tape and have started applying it around the outside around the border of the outside of the jacket. Once I've got this all good to go, we're going to sandwich them together, and then we will figure out buttonholes and buttons down the front. And then I can start moving on to the like side and back portions of the jacket. I feel like they're going to be a lot easier than this portion, just because this is not even close to what a traditional jacket is, and so I have no frame of reference. I'm kind of just like winging it at this point. But once this is figured out, the rest of the jacket should be pretty standard, I guess. I have like other patterns and directions I'm using as reference, and those will be able to help me through that part. So I was about to put this bias tape on, and I remembered I wanted to attach magnets to the front of the coat in order for closure to happen seamlessly, mostly because this will be a tearaway suit, or at least jacket, and magnets will be easier to tear away than like a button or a snap. But in order to kind of avoid having like an ugly patch just on the inside of the jacket, we're going to put this patch inside the lining. So before I put this like closure bias on, I am going to put this magnet inside the lining. Alright, so real quick before I ended up putting all of this together, I have my bias tape on and it's attached to my lining. But before I did that, I had to, where'd it go? I have sewn a magnet into the lining of my jacket. So this is the collar. I did have to pattern my own collar piece, and it is going to need to be wrapped in the bias tape that I made. So I think I'm gonna have, here is the front panel all done here. I still have to make the shell of the jacket, but the front panel is looking really nice. I have my magnet in, I have the collar piece on, and we are ready to move on to the outside, more shell part of the jacket. So the collar around the shell part of the jacket also gets some bias tape around it, so I do want to put that on first, just to kind of get it out of the way. The bias tape is really great because we can wrap it around the edges of things, whether they're finished or not, and be able to like make it look nice and neat. So now I have all of the jacket pieces all cut out, ready to go. We are going to start assembling. So we have a outer part and a lining part for each of the pieces here.
Oh my goodness, where was my brain? Good, 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 good. What is this? I sewed it inside out.
Because this is a new to me kind of situation where I have 2-part sleeves, there's a distinct front and back to each sleeve. I had to label each one of my sleeves so that I knew not only what side it went on, but which side was back and which side was front.
One thing that's been really difficult during this whole like jacket making process is remembering that the lining is opposite of the jacket. The lining, the good side, needs to be facing your body. So you have to make the whole jacket basically inside out, or mirror of the outer shell of the jacket. So you can see the shorter side of the asymmetric hem is on this side, and then up here on my lining, it's on that side. And thank heavens that I have a lining that has a very distinct front and back so that I can remember when I'm putting this together what direction everything needs to go, because this black fabric is the same on both sides. And so I probably likely would have put the whole thing together backwards and had to undo the whole thing. So I'm pleased with where we're at now. I double checked before I pinned this up, and now we're ready to make the 2 separate bodies of the jacket. And then once we have this all assembled, we'll put them together and then put the sleeves on.
So here we have both the lining and the jacket done, and we are just going to attach them to each other. And you have to attach them inside out and then flip it right side out so that you have clean seams on the inside of the jacket as well as the outside of the jacket, and then sandwiched in between the 2 layers is all of your dirty seam edges.
Okay, so I think the fit's good. I need to mark where the lines go on here, to kind of just line everything up, so I can put my fasteners in. I think for some reason the hem here is longer than the hem on the coat body part, so I will have to take this like front panel up a little bit, no big deal, and then put sleeves on. So
Alright, so I've got the lining sewn into the jacket, but we're going to take a moment and figure out where the lining needs to match up with the front panel so that we can line up our buttons and the magnet closures so that it all fits correctly. Once we have all of our closures on the jacket, I can then finish the bottom edge and put the sleeves in, and then it's just build
the accessories time, build the epaulets and the kind of like bracer details that are on the lower part of the sleeve. Alright, with the inner and outer portions of the coat combined together now, but still open on the bottom, it's time to figure out where all of my fasteners are going to go, both my visible fasteners here with the buttons and with my hidden fasteners. So up here I have buttons, 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 all the way down to here. And then since this is going to be a tearaway coat, I have to figure out how to make this a tearaway belt. So there's going to be a this is going to be sewn into place underneath, and then there's going to be a magnet here in the center front underneath the belt for tearaway purposes. So I had to figure out where that was going to go. And then again, since this is tearaway, these cannot be real buttons. So under here I have a magnet, and then I have a snap that will be going in here, and a snap that will be going in right here. So I have to be able to put all of those in before I close the rest of this off. So I need to sew a little patch around my magnet that's hidden in this corner here. I have to attach my snaps, and I have to put my buttons on. And then I can go ahead and put the sleeves on the body and close up the hem space so that I can have a finished jacket. At which point I can then finish my belt and the epaulets and the kind of bracer style cuffs that are going to go on it.
So here is everything pretty much ready to go. We're just going to hand sew the hems together because we don't want to have any visible stitching on the outside of the garment. So once we put the sleeves onto the jacket, it leaves behind kind of a rough, nasty looking edge. So what I've done is wrapped it in bias tape. The insides of like formal jackets, you don't really see any seams anywhere. It is usually lined all the way around. So what we do is I'm personally am wrapping it in bias tape.
Alright, with the jacket done, we're going to start working on accessories. The first thing I want to work on is the belt. This is going to be the inside of my belt. It's kind of like a foam. I think it goes on upholstery. And we're going to wrap it in this kind of like silvery satin. Kind of like tube it out, but make it nice and tight. And then we'll probably do some detail stitching along the edges here and here.
So after I finished the belt, which for some reason I did not film any of that, I needed to iron together the pieces for the shoulder epaulets or pauldrons or whatever you want to call them. But I wanted to have them really, really crisp with the foam kind of interfacing lining stuff. I'm not entirely sure what you call it. I think it reminds me of the kind of like foam fake bodysuit you would get out of like a Walmart Halloween costume. Anyway, I want that to be really firmly attached to the outer fabric so that we don't get any rippling or issues with it. So we're using Heat and Bond, which is kind of like, it's kind of like interfacing, but it's got glue on both sides. And essentially you can glue one fabric to another fabric. So we're going to glue my outer fabric to these pauldron pieces. And you just do it by ironing together the two pieces. I cut the shapes out of the Heat and Bond, and then there's kind of like a little wax paper backing on it, and you pull that off, and then you can use the other glue the fabric to the other side. Once everything's heat and bonded, I kind of lay everything out and get an idea of how I want it to shape together. I did that one for practice, and then we're going to repeat with the lining fabric on the other side to kind of make it so that it's lined on the back as well.
After that, I then will kind of take this bias tape, which I also made, and go around the edges. This one is done, and we just have to repeat it with the pieces there over on the table.
Alright, so we're making the kind of like bracer pieces that are on the jacket here, and I kind of divided it up into 5 sections because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 just showing where the different points are. And basically I kind of mapped out how these like chevron shapes are going to work, and now I'm just going to take it on the sewing machine and stitch them down, creating like a quilted effect on the surface of this. Once that's done, I can trim up the edges, sew this into one continuous round, and then put some bias tape along the edges, and they'll be done. So yeah, let's see how that turns out.
Because this is a tearaway suit, the belt is fake. It's not going to function like a normal belt. I'm going to actually tack it down to one side and then leave it magneted to the middle so that when you pull to tear away this jacket, the one side of the belt will remain in place and the other side will kind of just slip off with the rest of the buttons and magnets on the suit. So here is the finished project. I'm really proud of what I was able to achieve here. There were a lot of techniques, even aside from just the tailoring of the jacket, that I got to experiment with that I've never done before.